Ever wonder if there's a way to beat the casino using science? In the 1970s, a group of physics students attempted exactly that, using trigonometry and a wearable computer to predict the outcome of roulette. Their story is a wild ride of brilliance, risk, and a shocking exit strategy. Let's see how they turn the laws of physics into a winning formula, and why they ultimately walked away from the glittering lights of Vegas. The allure and illusion of randomness. Las Vegas, a city that glitters with promises of fortune and whispers of folly. The rhythmic click-clack of the roulette wheel spins a hypnotic tune, a melody that has captivated gamblers for centuries. Each spin promises a chance encounter with destiny, a fleeting moment where a tiny white ball can transform lives with a single bounce. But is this destiny truly random, or is there a way to outsmart the wheel, predict its secrets, and turn the odds in your favor? Enter a group of unassuming physics students in the 1970s. Unlike the high rollers dropping fistfuls of cash on the green felt, these students weren't enthralled by the allure of chance. Instead, they approached the roulette table with a healthy dose of skepticism. They believed that the seemingly chaotic dance of the ball and the wheel wasn't entirely random. There had to be a way, they reasoned, to identify patterns, to exploit subtle inconsistencies, and ultimately to crack the code of roulette. Their audacious plan wasn't fueled by a hunger for wealth, but by a scientific curiosity. They were fascinated by the very idea that randomness could be tamed, that with careful observation and calculation, the unpredictable could be predicted. This wasn't about blind luck. It was about harnessing the power of science to understand the intricate mechanics behind the game. Their journey wouldn't be a walk in the park. Casinos are notorious for their tight security and razor-sharp awareness of unusual betting patterns. To pull off their scheme, these students would need to be as cunning as they were intelligent. They would have to transform themselves from wide-eyed scholars into masters of disguise, operating in the shadows of the opulent casinos, the brains behind the bet. D.N.E. Farmer and Norman Packard weren't your typical Vegas high rollers. Forget about flashy suits and fistfuls of chips. These two were physics students, their pockets filled with textbooks and their minds brimming with a healthy dose of skepticism. They simply didn't buy the idea that roulette was pure chance. The hypnotic click-clack of the roulette wheel, the iconic red and black squares, it all seemed so random, so unpredictable. But for Farmer and Packard, that randomness felt like a challenge. They suspected that beneath the surface, there had to be a pattern, a hidden order waiting to be discovered. Fueled by this curiosity, they started spending their free time not at the craps table, but hunched over lab tables and notebooks. They weren't interested in lucky charms or lucky numbers. Their weapons of choice were far more analytical: rulers, calculators, and a thirst for knowledge. They became students of the roulette wheel, meticulously measuring its every detail. The diameter of the wheel, the weight of the ball, the distance between the slots, every millimeter was carefully documented. They even observed the croupier, the person who spins the wheel and releases the ball. How much force did they use? Did their technique vary from spin to spin? But the real detective work began when the wheel started to spin. Farmer and Packard spent hours at casinos, not placing bets, but simply watching. They observed the ball's erratic journey, the way it bounced off the deflectors, and the final, agonizing click as it settled into a numbered slot. They noticed subtle inconsistencies. The ball didn't always travel the same path. The wheel didn't always spin at a perfectly constant speed. These tiny variations, invisible to the untrained eye, were like whispers in the casino's cacophony, and Farmer and Packard were determined to decipher their message. Their late nights weren't spent partying, but poring over physics textbooks. They delved into the world of motion, forces, and friction. They wanted to understand the exact dance between the ball, the wheel, and gravity. If they could translate these physical principles into a formula, they theorized, they could predict where the ball would land. The idea was audacious, bordering on crazy. But for Farmer and Packard, the challenge was irresistible. They weren't just trying to win money, they were trying to prove that science could outsmart randomness, that even in the heart of glitzy Vegas, the laws of physics still held sway. Deconstructing the dance. The physics students of economic enterprises knew they couldn't just waltz into a casino and start winning big. Roulette, despite its glamorous image, wasn't pure luck. There had to be a reason why the ball landed on certain numbers more than others. Their goal was to identify these reasons, the tiny details that disrupted the illusion of randomness. Their first step involved becoming keen observers. They spent hours at roulette tables, not placing bets, but meticulously studying the mechanics of the game. They used rulers and tape measures to record the exact dimensions of the roulette wheel, the diameter, the width of the betting surface, and the distance between the numbered pockets. Every detail mattered. Next, they focused on the movement of the ball and the wheel. They used stopwatches to time the ball's journey around the wheel, noting how long it took for it to complete a single revolution. Friction was another factor they couldn't ignore. The ball didn't magically glide around the wheel. There was friction between the ball and the metal track, causing the ball to slow down gradually. They needed to understand how much this friction would affect the ball's path. They even considered the air resistance, the tiny push of air against the moving ball, although its impact was likely minimal. But their observations weren't enough. They needed a way to translate their findings into something actionable. Here's where physics came in. Remember those high school physics lessons about forces and motion? They became surprisingly relevant. Imagine the ball as a tiny object set in motion. The croupier's spin gives it an initial velocity, just like throwing a ball. The roulette wheel, on the other hand, is constantly rotating in the opposite direction. This creates a competition between two forces, the ball's forward momentum and the wheel's counter-rotation. Using a simplified version of Newton's laws of motion, Economic Enterprises could calculate the theoretical path of the ball based on its initial velocity and the wheel's rotation. It wasn't a perfect science. There were too many variables to account for perfectly, but by factoring in their observations of friction and other minor influences, they could create a model that predicted where the ball was most likely to land. This model wasn't a magic formula that guaranteed wins, but for these physics students, it was a step towards understanding the intricate dance between the ball, the wheel, and the laws of physics. It was a glimpse behind the curtain of randomness, a chance to tilt the odds ever so slightly in their favor. From textbook to tabletop, building a betting brain. The physics behind roulette was cracked, the equations balanced, but there was a crucial gap between their scientific knowledge and the bustling casino floor. How could they translate complex calculations into a practical tool usable at the heart of the action? Enter the marvel of their operation, a miniature computer disguised as a wearable device. Think of it like a tiny calculator strapped discreetly to their bodies. This ingenious device, a marvel of miniaturization for its time, was their secret weapon. But it wasn't magic. It relied on a clever combination of pre-programmed information and real-time data collection. Before heading to the casino, Economic Enterprises would meticulously observe a specific roulette wheel. They'd measure the time it took for the wheel to complete a full rotation and the speed at which the ball bounced around the rim. This crucial information was then fed into the wearable computer. Here's where the physics came into play. The computer had pre-programmed algorithms based on the equations Farmer and Packard had developed. These algorithms factored in the size of the wheel, the observed ball and wheel speeds, and even tiny details like the friction between the ball and the wheel. Imagine the computer as a tiny physics whiz. Once it received the data about the specific roulette wheel, it would whir into action, running the pre-programmed calculations based on the scientific principles they discovered. But the computer wasn't going to announce the winning number with a booming voice. Discretion was key. The wearable device had a subtle way of communicating its findings. It might vibrate a specific pattern on the user's skin, or perhaps a tiny LED light would discreetly flash, indicating the most probable area where the ball was likely to land. This ingenious system transformed complex scientific calculations into a simple, real-time nudge in the right direction. It wasn't a guarantee, but for Economic Enterprises, it was a significant advantage in the unpredictable world of roulette. The wearable computer wasn't just a technological marvel, it was a testament to their resourcefulness. They'd taken academic knowledge and transformed it into a practical tool, blurring the lines between the physics lab and the casino floor. It was a clever fusion of science and gambling, a tiny device holding the potential to disrupt the very foundation of chance-based games. Vegas lights and calculated wins. The bright lights of Las Vegas seemed even brighter to the physics students turned gamblers. Armed with their miniature computers hidden beneath their clothes, they felt like they held the winning formula in their palms. The initial forays into the casinos were exhilarating. They meticulously observed the roulette wheels, their eyes darting between the ball, the spinning wheel, and the timer on their hidden devices. Following a predetermined routine, one member of the group would discreetly record the ball's release and the wheel's rotation using a tiny stopwatch. This data was then fed into the computer, a process that felt like a secret handshake between them and the machine. The computer, a marvel of miniaturization for its time, whirred silently, performing complex calculations based on the physics principles they had meticulously programmed. Within seconds, a tiny vibration or a discrete light signal on the device would indicate the most probable landing zones for the ball. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was a significant advantage. Their bets, once based on gut feeling and blind luck, were now guided by scientific calculations. The wins started rolling in. Small at first, then steadily growing larger. The initial thrill of a few extra bucks quickly turned into the heady satisfaction of consistently outsmarting the house. They weren't placing outrageous bets, but their consistent wins over multiple nights started attracting unwanted attention. Casino security personnel are trained to spot unusual betting patterns, and the students couldn't help but feel a prickle of paranoia with every successful spin. The initial exhilaration was tempered by the constant need to be vigilant, to blend in with the throngs of tourists and seasoned gamblers. The once carefree nights at the roulette table were now a high-stakes game, not just against the wheel, but against the watchful eyes of the casino. A glitch in the system. Vegas nights pulsed with frenetic energy, the air thick with anticipation and the clinking of chips. Economic enterprises, initially basking in the glow of their success, found themselves facing a new kind of pressure. Every spin of the wheel felt like a tightrope walk, the thrill of winning constantly tinged with the fear of being caught. The casinos, ever vigilant, were their biggest adversaries. Security personnel gazes lingering just a second too long on players who seemed to win with uncanny consistency. The students, usually at ease with complex equations, found themselves sweating over simple decisions like what to wear or how to casually place their bets. One particularly nerve-wracking evening, things took a turn for the worse. As they huddled around the roulette table, the familiar buzz of the tiny computer strapped to their team member's leg went off. But this time, something went terribly wrong. Instead of the discrete vibration, a jolt of electricity ran through the device, sending a jolt of pain shooting up their leg. The player yelped in surprise, momentarily drawing unwanted attention from the nearby dealer. Panic flared in the group. Not only had their carefully crafted device malfunctioned, but it had also potentially blown their cover. This wasn't just about defying the odds anymore, it was about gambling with their safety. The initial thrill of the heist began to pale in comparison to the very real dangers of being caught by casino security or facing legal repercussions. The legacy. Economic Enterprises' story wasn't just about walking away with pockets full of cash. It was really the power of human curiosity and the ability to find patterns in the seemingly random. They proved that with careful observation and a good grasp of scientific principles, even games of chance could be approached with a strategic mindset. Imagine flipping a coin. We all know it's a 50-50 shot, heads or tails, but what if the coin was slightly uneven? Or the surface you flipped it on wasn't perfectly flat? These tiny imperfections could influence the outcome no matter how slight. Economic Enterprises applied this concept to the roulette wheel. They identified subtle inconsistencies, variations in the wheel's speed, the ball's trajectory, and the friction between the two. By meticulously studying these factors, they cracked the code, turning the unpredictable into a problem they could solve with math. Their story isn't just about physics geeks outsmarting casinos, although That is pretty cool. It's like the world around us is filled with hidden patterns, waiting to be discovered. From the weather to the stock market, there's a science behind everything, even if it appears random at first glance. Those boys left a question for all of us. Have advancements in technology and security made their method obsolete? What do you think? Just tell us in the comments, and don't forget to share this story with your friends who enjoy a good dose of science and intrigue. And also, hit that subscribe button.